In 2022, boatyards could not keep up with the tidal wave of orders. Manufacturers ran extra shifts, dealers filled showrooms, and registrations spiked like never before. But now, nearly new sailboats are being dumped for pennies across America. What triggered such a brutal reversal? How did the sailing dream become a nationwide fire sale almost overnight? The real crisis started long before the auctions began. During the first 2 years of the pandemic, demand for new boats soared across the United States. Factory order books filled up at a pace not seen since before the 2008 financial crisis. Manufacturers responded by ramping up production. Brunswick, Beneteau, Catalina, and other industry leaders ran their plants around the clock, adding second and third shifts, and even breaking ground on new facilities. Dealers, flush with eager buyers, leveraged their limited inventory for higher prices and stricter terms. Floor plans became a double-edged sword, allowing showrooms to overflow with new models, but exposing businesses to mounting risk if sales slowed. At the height of this frenzy, the National Marine Manufacturers Association reported that new boat sales, led by powerboats but echoed in sailboats, jumped by as much as 40% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Factory backlogs stretched 12 to 18 months, and boat shows became scenes of bidding wars and waiting lists. In 2021 alone, over 415,000 first-time buyers entered the market, most seeking the freedom and isolation that boating seemed to promise. Dealers described lines out the door, phones ringing off the hook, and customers wiring deposits for boats they had never seen in person. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks were forming. While overall recreational boat registrations climbed, the sailboat segment saw only a modest uptick, about a 2.7% rise in 2022, with total U.S. sailboat registrations peaking near 88,300. The real surge was in factory orders and unsold inventory, not in lasting ownership. As manufacturers chased the wave, they borrowed heavily, betting that the good times would last. Dealers, too, extended themselves, relying on floor plan financing and optimistic forecasts. By late 2022, the industry was riding high, but the volume of unsold boats sitting in storage yards and showrooms hinted at a looming problem. The stage was set for a correction that would ripple through every corner of the market. In early 2023, boat dealers across the country opened their inboxes to news that would upend the industry overnight. The federal government revived the luxury tax on new boats, slapping a 10% surcharge on any vessel sold above $100,000. For the average new sailboat buyer, that meant an instant, unavoidable price hike, tens of thousands of dollars tacked onto already steep invoices. Within weeks, high-end dealers reported that orders evaporated. Buyers who had once lined up for the latest Beneteau or Catalina models vanished, spooked by the new tax and the uncertainty it created. Lenders grew wary, pulling back on boat loans and raising rates, which made financing even harder. Then came the EPA's Tier 5 marine diesel rule, finalized in 2024. The new standards demanded a 90% cut in nitrogen oxide emissions for engines between 56 and 560 kilowatts, and a 75% drop in particulates. For most sailboat manufacturers, retrofitting existing inventory was a non-starter. Installing compliant engines would mean redesigning hulls, re-engineering cooling systems, and swallowing costs that could reach $50,000 or more per vessel. For boats already built but not yet sold, the rulebook turned them into orphans overnight. Dealers fielded frantic calls from buyers backing out of contracts. Factory floors, once humming with overtime shifts, fell silent as cancellations piled up. The numbers were stark. National Marine Manufacturers Association data shows new sailboat sales in the $110,000 to $300,000 range dropped by as much as 80% in the first year after the tax. Manufacturers offered rebates and slashed prices, but it was not enough. By late 2024, yards overflowed with unsold boats, many powered by engines now considered obsolete. Internal memos from Brunswick and Catalina detail last-ditch lobbying efforts in Washington, but the policies held firm. The result was a perfect storm of regulatory shock and vanished demand, turning what had been a backlog of future dreams into a liability measured in millions of dollars and thousands of idle hulls. Dealers, once flush with deposits, now faced mounting interest on floor plan loans and no buyers in sight. March 2025, Fort Pierce, Florida. Before dawn, the queue outside the insurance impound lot stretched for blocks. Pickup trucks and flatbeds idled in the haze, their drivers clutching auction paddles and coffee, eyes fixed on the chain-link fence. Inside, row after row of nearly new sailboats, some less than 2 years old, waited for their fate. The lot held 1,400 vessels, most repossessed from failed charter fleets or abandoned after a single unlucky season. Each one had once carried a six-figure price tag. Today, the starting bid was $50. By the time the gates opened, the crowd had swelled into the hundreds. Some came from as far as Michigan and Texas, caravanning south after whispers of a liquidation event bigger than anything seen in the industry's history. The bidders called themselves the Dollar Armada. They came with cash in hand and dreams of scoring a boat for less than the price of a night in a motel. The first gavel fell at 9 a.m. Within minutes, the scene turned frantic. Bidders sprinted between hulls, scribbling lot numbers on the backs of auction flyers. Shouts rang out as deals closed for a fraction of old retail: $150 for a 38-foot Beneteau, $400 for a catamaran with a year-old engine. Law enforcement struggled to keep order. As the day wore on, tempers flared. Some buyers tried to bypass the formal process, climbing over barriers to slap makeshift sold signs on boats they had not yet won. Officers called for backup when a group broke through a side gate, determined to claim their prizes before the paperwork could catch up. By sunset, police had made 3 arrests and issued warnings to dozens more. The auction house reported every vessel cleared, 1,400 boats gone in a single weekend. The average sale price was just over $300. For many, it was the deal of a lifetime. For the industry, it was a public spectacle of collapse, captured on cell phones and streamed live to stunned boat owners across the country. The Fort Pierce fire sale did not just empty an impound lot. It signaled that the bottom had truly fallen out. Ellis Yachts closed its doors quietly on a gray February morning. For Mark Ellis, whose family name had been welded to hulls in Southwest Harbor for 3 generations, the decision was not just financial. The factory floor, once alive with the sound of routers and sanders, had fallen silent after months of canceled orders and unpaid invoices. EPA's Tier 5 rule and the revived luxury tax had left the shop with a warehouse full of nearly new boats that no one could legally or affordably use. Mark gathered his crew, 48 men and women, who had built boats side by side for years, and handed out final paychecks. Some wept. Others just stared at the rows of shrink-wrapped hulls, knowing there would be no more launches that spring. Liquidation followed in a blur. More than 200 Ellis sailboats, some never touched water, were listed at prices that seemed like misprints: $1, $5, or a few $100s at most. Buyers drove up the coast from as far as New Jersey, drawn by rumors of a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Mark stood by the office door, handing over keys and pink slips to strangers who could barely believe their luck. A few buyers loaded their boats onto trailers and disappeared before noon. Others lingered, unsure what to do with a vessel that cost less than a new refrigerator, but came with slip fees and uncertain paperwork. One of the new owners, a tradesman recently laid off from a local shipyard, picked up a 28-foot boat for $275. He spent his severance turning it into an Airbnb, moored just outside town. Bookings filled up for the summer, but the project brought headaches, permits, insurance, and a steady trickle of city inspectors. For every story of reinvention, there were others marked by loss. Marine suppliers lost their anchor client overnight. Local diners and hardware stores saw business dry up. The collapse at Ellis rippled through the community, leaving questions about what would fill the void. For Mark, the hardest part was locking up the shop, knowing that decades of skill and pride had been reduced to a clearance sale, and a future built on hope had capsized in a matter of months. Today, Boatyards overflow with vessels built for dreams that vanished almost overnight. As consumer trends shift faster than industries can pivot, the next collapse may already be taking shape elsewhere. Markets move on, but the lessons and the losses remain. What industry will be left adrift next? Share your thoughts below.